It's good to be here. It's good to be sober. If you're new, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. Thanks, Phil. It's always an honor and a privilege to share in Alcoholics Anonymous. And yeah, since I'm being recorded, I should note that I have been keeping Bill C sober for about 25 years now. I just want to put that out there. If it weren't for me, God knows what would happen to him or AA, frankly. But because he thinks that, he is so instrumental in Alcoholics Anonymous. But actually, he's actually ready to talk in New Zealand here in a few minutes. Actually, a couple hours, I think. I like the guy a lot. We do travel a lot together. And he sits on my right-hand side pretty much every Monday night at my home group, which is the Hermosa Beach Men's Stag. My sobriety date is July 27th, 1996. So I recently celebrated 25 years of sobriety. That's my first day of sobriety. I've been consecutively sober since then, and that wasn't the plan. It wasn't by design. I've come to learn that from the guys that I've sponsored, that's probably not the norm. Most people are in and out a little bit. I didn't. I had my butt whooped pretty good when I got here, and I actually really kind of hit bottom really about 100 days sober. What happened to me was I got popped for a DUI. I came into Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm 37 years old, and I immediately noticed that you guys were telling my story. The facts and circumstances were different, but it was my story. You talked about this allergic reaction that you had with alcohol that I never heard that before. I never heard about that unquenchable thirst that we get when we drink, and I identified with that. But you told me that wasn't the main problem. You told me that the main problem was my thinking. My thinking mind, that if it was just the alcohol, I would just go Nancy Reagan and say no, and everything would be fine. And it's not fine. In fact, I came at Alcoholics Anonymous and I stopped drinking because I realized, I have powerless over alcohol. I'm not quite sure my life is unmanageable. I'm not really buying into that when I first got here, but I'm powerless over alcohol. I got to stop drinking. I'm going to get in trouble. I've been getting in trouble. I was in the Army for 13 and a half years. I've been in jail 5 different countries, not including the United States, Canada, or Mexico, because those don't count. Those are like bonus countries. And it's not that every time I drank, I was in jail, but every time I was in jail, I'd been drinking. And I got to stop drinking. So I come into AA and people are telling me things that are really good advice, like don't drink and go to meetings. Meeting makers make it, 90 meetings in 90 days, all of which is good practical advice. And it has a lot to do with the activity and the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, but it doesn't have anything to do with the program or the action in AA. But I don't know that, and so I'm not drinking. And there are other people that are telling me that don't leave before the miracle. So I'm hunkered down. I'm waiting for the miracle. The miracle is not happening. You guys are talking about being restored to sanity. I feel like I am going nuts. I'm a jackass at home. I'm a jackass at work. I'm a jackass at meetings. I come into meetings and the old timers are looking at me and they're going, Lamb, just sit in the corner. And for God's sakes, don't talk to any newcomers because they still have hope. I mean, it was really bad. It was really a bleak, dark time for me. I felt like I was hearing a lot of white noise. I really wanted to drink badly, but I know I can't drink. And like I said, I'm about 100 days stark raving sober. There are people that are talking about the steps, which were read tonight. They're talking about the program, which is the steps. They're talking about the book, which is where you find them. They're talking about a God or a higher power, which is the point of the exercise. And they're talking about a sponsor, which is just simply a guide that takes you through the process. But I'm not drinking. I'm not an extra credit guy. Last thing I want to do is get over sober. So I'm waiting, and it's not happening. It's funny when I finally got a sponsor, Michael used to refer to me as I was like a dog on linoleum. There was a whole lot of activity. My limbs are moving, but I'm going nowhere, right? So I'm a trial lawyer by trade. I go on a business trip. I'm back in Pennsylvania. I'm back in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm doing some depositions to get ready for a trial. And I'm melting down. I've got an honor bar, which is crazy because I'm a newcomer. I have no honor, but they've given me this little mini fridge. I got the key to it. If any of you have ever seen the movie Flight with Denzel Washington, those little honor bars, they talk to you. And we're having a conversation. I'm opening and shutting the honor bar. I inventory it, because I need to know what's in there. I arrange the domestics, the imports. And it doesn't have everything I want and need, but it's like a really good start. 2 by 2 by 2. There's bourbon. There's vodka. There's gin, there was no tequila, which was annoying, but I mean, I want to drink. I want to drink. And for whatever reason, I don't drink. You can call it the dumb luck of the alcoholic. Norm Alpe used to call it seconds and inches. I believe it's the grace of God, but I would not have referred to it in that way at that time. And I love the big book and I love the 12 and 12, but when I finally got a sponsor, he had me listen to a series of talks by a guy named Chuck Chamberlain. And he gave these talks in 1975 in Palo Mesa, California, at a retreat. And before he died in the early 80s, one of his sponsees had him transcribed. They put it in a book. It's called A New Pair of Glasses. And in the book version, there's a drawing. There's only one drawing in the whole book. It's a really simple drawing. What Chuck does is he draws a circle. And then he puts all the people, plants, and animals inside the circle of life. Then he puts life, good, God, whatever your concept of a higher power is, inside the circle of life. And then he draws a stick man outside the circle, separate and apart. And what keeps that stick man, which is Chuck, and it's me, and because it's 8 o'clock on the East Coast, I'm not judging, but I'm assuming it's you, outside that circle is a thin line that Chuck identifies as ego or conscious separation from God. The 11th step talks about conscious contact. I've got conscious separation. 12 and 12 refers to it as anxious apartness. It's the grand illusion, the prime delusion of every alcoholic I've ever worked with. It is not true. It is not real. But I can't see that. It's actually physically and spiritually impossible for there to be lamb outside the entire circle of life. I'm inside the circle, you're inside the circle, we're all inside the circle. And the better reality is there's not an edge to the circle. But I haven't had the psychic change, the transformative experience. I haven't had my personality reoriented. I haven't had a spiritual awakening, a spiritual experience, whatever you want to call it that we talk about in step 12. I haven't had that because I haven't done the steps. But I don't drink. And I fly home, I get up the next morning and I had time to think on the flight. And because I'm a newcomer, I've developed a newcomer plan. Now, if you're new, I guarantee you've got a newcomer plan. We all have newcomer plans. And my experience with newcomer plans is the newcomer that develops the newcomer plan thinks it's brilliant. I thought mine was brilliant. My experience is that these newcomer plans are all shrouded in a cloud of stupidity that the creator of the plan cannot possibly comprehend. So my suggestion is that if you've got a newcomer plan, that you tell somebody with a little time after they stop laughing. Hopefully they'll explain to you that it's not such a good idea and they'll maybe dissuade you from executing your newcomer plan. But my newcomer plan was, I was in the Army for 13 and a half years and I'd gone through airborne school, I'd gone through Ranger school, I'd gone through selection and assessment. I served as a Green Beret for a while. I had a TSSCI clearance. They picked me up, sent me to law school. I became a lawyer in the Army under the funded legal education program. When I got out in 1993, I was a JAG. And I was working in the Pentagon and I was the intelligence oversight advisor for the United States Army, which should concern you. And when I got out, I came out and I started working for a private international law firm. And I'm like, I don't know, I was in 96, so it was another 3 years before I got sober. And this is the fall of 96. So I come in at 37. I'm 38 years old by now. And I got a newcomer plan. My plan is I acquired some things when I was in the Army. I had some weapons and some demolition, and I had 13 passports. They've got my photograph, different names from different countries. And I didn't turn it in 1993 when I got out. And I didn't really think of it as stealing at the time. I mean, I hadn't read the book yet. This whole thing about rigorous honesty was, and I'm a lawyer. I'm not that worried about that kind of concept. And I didn't think of it as stealing. I just thought, this might come in handy one day, and today's the day. Because my newcomer plan is I'm going to take my blue passport, the one that every citizen has, that has my photograph and my name on it. I'm going to leave the country. I'm going to fly up to British Columbia. When I get to British Columbia, I'm going to start flipping passports and identities. I'll head east, maybe go to Europe for a week or two. I'll come back to British Columbia, and then my newcomer plan is I'm going to head down to Costa Rica. I've got some former Army associates of mine that are doing some interesting marketing and distribution down in Costa Rica. This is my newcomer plan. Now, I got a wife and a daughter, but this is a career move, so I don't really consult with them about this. But I cannot execute my seemingly brilliant plan because the 13 passports that I should have turned in 1993, they're all current. They haven't expired, but I haven't paid attention to my regular passport. It's expired. Now, here's the pathetic thing about this. Been to college. The Army sent me to law school. They sent me to get an LLM, a Master of Laws, right next to the University of Virginia. I'm licensed to practice before the Supreme Court of the United States of America. But that particular fall morning of 1996, I did not have the synaptic capacity in my brain to realize I didn't need a passport. This is pre 9/11. I could have flown up to British Columbia on my driver's license. I didn't even need, but I can't even comprehend that, you know. So I don't know what to do. And I went to a meeting and I met a guy named Jim who, without my permission, became my grant sponsor. And I made the mistake of mentioning to Jim that I thought it was time that I should interview for a sponsor. Now, that's going to sound odd to you if you've been around a while, but in my mind, because I'm new, what I'd heard people say is, you know, find someone that has what you want. Well, I got a complex set of social issues here. Obviously, not anybody can sponsor this, right? So I should be able to interview the person because I alone really have the ability to choose who's right for me. Another delusion. Jim looked at me and he just said, "You are pathetic." And he took me outside and he introduced me to a guy named Michael. He said, "Michael, Steve, Michael, sponsor, sponsee, go with God." And he walked away laughing. And I thought, this is not funny. It's not even slightly amusing, but Michael's excited because he's just been delivered a new fish. So he reaches in his pocket, he gets out a piece of paper and a pen, he writes his name and address and phone number on it, and tells me to show up at his house Monday night, 6:30. And he wants me to read the first chapter of the 12 and 12, which is the first step, and then read from the very beginning of the book through the doctor's opinion and highlight what I agree with or disagree with. If you've got any questions, go ahead and write in the book. It's my book, and we'll talk about it, you know, once we meet on Monday at 6:30. Okay, so I do this and I show up at his house and he tells me a little bit about himself. I tell him a little bit about myself to include my newcomer plan. He kind of chuckles and we had some conversations about drinking and just to give you an idea what it was like, you know, towards this is how drinking manifests to me. This is one example. I'm the kind of alcoholic, my wife will send me out to get milk. It is really not a complicated task. There's like 3 or 4 subparts to it. You gotta leave the house. You gotta go to the store. You gotta buy the milk, and then you gotta come home with the milk. And I am pretty good at the first 2 or 3, but the whole coming home with the milk, not so much. I run into guys like Phil or somebody like definitely John, not maybe John, but definitely John, who's on the screen here. And we start talking and they say to me something rather innocuous, like, "Would you like to have a beer?" Well, of course I would like to have a beer. And beer is not even like, it's like a basic food group, right? It's not even drinking really, right? So what happens is we go have a beer. But because I have that allergic reaction to alcohol, it doesn't quench my thirst. I get thirstier. So I'm drinking more and more beer, but that's not sufficient to me. I don't understand the concept of enough. I want more and I want to get there. I don't even know where there is. I just want to get there now. So I need an accelerant. I like tequila. So I'm drinking beer, shoot tequila, drinking beer, shoot tequila. 3 days later, I come to. I used to refer to it as time travel. I now, since I've been in AA, realize it's just blacking out. It's a skill set that many of us have. It's kind of entertaining for us. We meet new and exotic people, wind up places we never thought we'd be before. It's a quick way to get there. You don't even know how long it took you to get there, but non-alcoholics are not impressed with it at all. They're kind of annoyed with it. And so I come to after 3 days and I'm like, oh man, I'm selfish and I'm self-centered, but I'm not entirely inconsiderate. I'm like, I gotta go get the milk. So I rush to the store and I buy the milk. And I go home to my wife. I'm all proud of myself. I'm like, "Hey, baby, I got the milk." She's not impressed. And she's not slightly annoyed. She's like downright pissed off because I've been gone for 3 days. Now, in my mind, it feels like I just left. I've accomplished the mission. I don't understand what the problem is. She's upset. You're upset. Everybody's upset about my drinking. And that's just how I drink. You know, I can't stop once I start. It's crazy, you know, and the only thing that explains it is the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous and you. So we get together and he says to me, he says, "Okay, start reading." And I told him, no, I did my homework. I've got my highlighting. I'm ready to discuss it, like you said. He said, no, open the book and start reading. I said, "No, really, honestly, I did it." And I showed him in the book. I've got the highlighting. I got some questions. He's like, "That's not what we're going to do, Lane. What we're going to do is we're going to read the book." We're going to go through from the very beginning through the very end. We're going to go word for word, line by line, paragraph by paragraph, through the whole book. And I remember thinking, oh my God, this is pathetic. Again, because I'm judgmental, I got a delusion thing going on. I'm thinking, man, this is a level of lameness that I never thought was possible. You've completely exceeded my expectations. And I jumped to the conclusion that my sponsor must be an idiot. He probably can't even read. I know he's coming up on 5 years sober, but he can't. But I've been beaten into a state of reasonableness. I've been crushed by the weight of my own alcoholism, and I got nothing. So I figure, you know what, I'll read to him. I might help him. I mean, he might be struggling with his sobriety, whatever, right? I found out later, my sponsor's got a master's degree in nuclear engineering. He was the chief technology officer for one of the largest gaming companies in the world. He's younger than me and has been retired for quite some time. He's doing fine. He is not stupid. But for a long time, I thought the guy was an idiot. So I'm reading with the guy, right? And if you knew, what happened is we read the book. And when we got to a prayer, we said the prayer. And when we got to a step, we worked the step. And it saved my life. And I never thought it would work. Never thought it would work. And if you're new and you're thinking it won't work, I'm not trying to be mean or cruel, but we don't really care what you think. We're assuming your thinking is screwed up. And, the book tells us on page 23, the main problem of the Alcoholic Center is in the mind. It's up here, and when we've been here for a while, we realize it's the thinking problem. It's the thinking. I start thinking and then I wind up drinking. But the interesting thing about Alcoholics Anonymous is even though we all agree we've got a thinking problem, we don't get together and go, okay, here's the deal. We've got a thinking problem. Let's think our way out of this jackpot. No, what we do is we take a bunch of actions that we call the steps that we don't agree with or believe in. We think they're stupid. They have nothing to do with our complex set of social issues. And what happens is it changes the way we think. It's actually quite remarkable. And I've never met anybody that's come into AA and listened to the steps being read or seen them, on the posters or up on the wall and gone, oh, thank God, I've been waiting my whole life for this, Annette, will you take me through these 12 golden steps of recovery so that I can find, develop, and maintain a conscious contact with a God of my understanding so that I can live and move and have my being in the world without drinking alcohol or doing any of the party favors that some of us apparently like to do. No, we don't do that. We look at it like, really? This is stupid. Is there like a door number 2? Is there an option B? Really? That's it? That's what you got? The steps? And like I said, I'm a lawyer. I'm not stupid. I look at 4 and 5. That's confession. That's evidence. No way. No way. Not doing. And by the way, if you're new, that's not the bad part. The bad part is 8 and 9. And again, I'm not stupid. I know that it's their money. But some of them don't even know I've got it. And how is me giving them their money going to help me get sober? I mean, I come in here, I get sober. I need money. I need the money step. And then you tell me in the book, it's the spiritual always precedes the material. Woo, woo, woo. I mean, this is ridiculous. It makes no sense until you do it. Makes no sense looking forward. Only makes sense looking backward. And I don't know why that is, but I know how that is. I know how it works. I just don't know why it works. And, you do this process and something happens. And if you really, really want it to come true for you, really want it to mean something, sit down with another man or woman and try to take them through the steps and explain to them the experience that you have had and continue to have in the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And the big book will come alive. It'll just change your life. So we go through this process. And when we get to the 4th step, again, I'm a lawyer, so I'm a wordsmith. I'm a pain in the ass. I'm an arguer. And Michael knows this, so he takes me to page 65 and he shows me the columns and he says, you see the columns? I'm like, yeah. He goes, you notice anything about those columns? I'm like, no, not really. He goes, well, take another look. So I look at you, what do you think? You see anything? I go, well, Mr. Brown's kind of an asshole. Somebody needs to tighten him up. No, that's not what we're talking about. He said, you'll notice there's not even complete sentences there. It's kind of like bullet points. So even though it talks a lot about, you hear people say it's your life story, that's okay. If you want to do that, I'll listen to it. But really what I would prefer you to do is follow the outline of the book. The first column is the resentment. It's the person, the institution, or the principle. 2 or 3 words, that's all you need. Second column is the cause, 2 or 3 words, that's all you need. The third column is the condition or how it affects you. Is it self-esteem, pocketbook, security, ambition, personal relations, or sex relations? Just jot that down. And he says there's not really a fourth column, but if you look on page 67, it says we're going to refer back to our list and we're going to identify mistake, fault, and blame. We call those character defects: selfishness, self-centeredness, self-seeking, dishonesty. The 12 and 12 refers to the 7 deadly sins: pride, greed, lust, anger, gluttony, envy, sloth. The book talks a lot about fear. And then it says on page 67, it's sometimes referred to as the prayer to the sick man. Where am I unwilling to forgive this person? Where am I unwilling to ask God to help me show this person patience, pity, and tolerance? That's it. And then he said in the fear inventory, he gave me the instructions on that, and sexual misconduct. He turned me loose. He said it should take me a couple weeks. Took me about 5 or 6 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks to think about it, and 2 or 3 weeks to do it. Because like the book says, it's simple but not easy. The simple part is the black part, the written part, the instructions. The not easy part is my ego, which tries to separate me from you and from God. The latter is impossible, and the former is possible, but not very comfortable. That's why the first word in the first step is we. So we go through this process. I got this inventory. I show up at his house, and even though we share in a general way, if you're new, I'm going to tell you the first person on my inventory, just so you understand how simple this can be. Now, I will tell you, I'm not an authority in Alcoholics Anonymous. I wasn't appointed. I wasn't anointed. I'm just the person that Phil asked to share tonight. You're here to have your experience, not mine or not your sponsors. AA is experiential, and this is how I got my experience. So this is just what I did. It doesn't mean this is what you need to do. So the first person on my inventory, first word, first column, 2 words, my father. Second column, 2 words, the cause, deserted me. Now, Michael is prepared for a long talk. He asked me some questions. I explained to him that, I'm 4 or 5 years old. I'm growing up in Las Vegas, Nevada. It's the early 60s. My father is in the Air Force, and he leaves. He goes to Vietnam. He goes to Southeast Asia. He does not die there, but he stays there. He does several tours in the Air Force. He joins an outfit called Air America. He meets a Thai woman named Lien Thong. He marries her, apparently before he divorces my mother. I have a half-sister named Peck, and I've never met Peck. I've never met Lien Thong. And I'm 38 years old by the time I write this inventory, and I've had very minimal contact, just a few times in the last 3 decades with my father. He deserted me. What does it affect? Everything. Self-esteem, pocketbook, security, ambition, personal relations, sex relations. Other than that, everything's going pretty good. What I don't realize is this is one of these overarching seminal resentments. It's impacted all my relationships. My sponsor realizes that, but I don't. I go to the 4th column and I identify, anger. I was really angry for a long time. I'm still pretty pissed off at my father. Fear, I got a lot of fear. And I don't want to say the prayer to the sick man about my father. I don't want to forgive my father. So I read this to Michael. And he stops me and he goes, I want to make sure I understand this. I'm like, okay. He goes, you're resentful at your dad, right? Yeah. So he deserted you when you were a young boy. You've got some residual anger. You got a lot of fear, and you don't want to forgive your father, if I understand you correctly. I said, yeah. And I've read ahead, Michael. I know there's an 8th and a 9th step. It's not going to happen. Absolutely not. Forget it. He goes, look, we're just doing the 5th step tonight. But I want you to understand, we're going to get to that eventually, because this is a program of honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. He said, but I do have another question. I said, okay, what is it? He goes, well, if I understand you correctly, like when you came to me, you had that newcomer plan, remember? Like, yeah. Passports, yeah. You're going to go to Costa Rica, yeah. Well, you got a wife and a daughter, right? Yeah. Well, you didn't say that you were not going to do anything like this. You didn't say you were going to desert. You didn't use the word that you were going to desert them. But really, is there a functional difference between what you were planning on doing and in what your father actually did? Because you weren't taking them with you. My first thought was, this is not going the way I thought it was going to go at all. And I put my head down and I muttered something like, well, if you look at it that way. Now, if you're new, that's why in the 5th step, we admit to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs, because I can't see me for myself. I can't see that I have become my father. I can't see that. I need someone to hold a mirror up to me to reflect me back to me, and that's my sponsor. So, I'm not happy about this. I'm not happy about this at all. I know now it's a spiritual experience, and it's not like the white light kind of experience. And there that happens to some of us, but those are actually pretty rare. My sponsor has referred to this as a black light spiritual experience. And what do I mean by that? If you've ever seen any of the crime movies, like somebody gets murdered, right? The detectives show up. The first thing that they do is they secure the scene, they put up the police tape, and then they call in the crime techs, the CSI people. And what happens is the CSI person, she or he goes into the room and they take a substance called luminol and they spray it all over the walls. And then they turn off the lights and they turn on a black light. And what happens is the black light shows the evidence of the crime, usually the blood spatters all over the wall. So this process of doing this inventory, I've been exposed. I've become my father. I am not happy about this. I finish the rest of the inventory. I go home. I get quiet, like it says on the bottom of 75. I flip the page to 76. I do 6 and 7. 6 is a lot about willingness. 7 is a lot about humility. I will tell you that I had very little of either, but I'm scared because I'm afraid I'm going to drink and I'm really upset about my father. So I'm trying to get through this. I got to do this 8-step list. And really the 6 and 7, they mean a lot more to me now, but I got to tell you, it really was kind of a superficial pass that I did of these. I said the prayer, I just moving on. I look on page 76, I got to do this 8-step list. And it says, we have a list of the persons that we've harmed and to whom we're willing to make amends. We made it when we did our inventory. And I'm thinking, oh crap, if I'd have known that, I would have never put my father on the list, right? So I'm a lawyer, I'm creative, I just take him off the list, right? And so I put everybody else on the list, and my sponsor asked me to do the proposed amends, and I got this list. I show up to my sponsor's house. He says, let me see the list. Apparently he doesn't trust me. I don't understand the problem, but I give him the list. He looks at the list, he says, your father is not on the list. I'm like, you're damn right he's not on the list. I told you he wasn't gonna be on the list. He goes, do you think you're any better than your father? I'm like, no, and you pointed that out to me. I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. I had a real problem with sarcasm for a while, by the way. And so he goes, look, what do you think about the Lord's Prayer? I'm like, what? Because the Lord's Prayer. I don't know. I don't have a problem with the Lord's Prayer. I mean, we say it at the end of a lot of meetings, but yeah. Goes, what about that clause in the Lord's Prayer? Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. What do you think of that? I'm like, I think it's a damn trick question. That's what I think. I'm not stupid. It's a spiritual truth. It's a maxim. I get it. He goes, well, do you agree with it? Yeah, I can see how that would work. Are you willing to do it regarding your father? Absolutely not. You take him to page 99 in the 12 and 12. That's where the 11-step prayer is. It is through forgiving that we are forgiven. I agree with it. Makes sense. I am not going to do it. So he says, well, look, step 6 and step 8 are a lot about willingness. Are you willing to pray for the willingness? Like, sure. Okay. He goes, okay, I'll pray, you'll pray. Meantime, start making amends. So I started going out, I'm making amends. I'm paying back the money. I make amends to the wife. I am back in the big bed. I don't quite have the crossover privileges that I think I deserve, but things are going better. I get into this active 10-step process. I'm trying to make amends promptly. I'm talking to my sponsor about it. I'm doing the evening review that it talks about on page 86. I'm trying to do this 11th step. I'm trying to pray and meditate and get into conscious contact with God, which I don't really understand. And I'm trying to, practice the principles and carry the message. And apparently I'm doing some of that because a lot of guys are asking me to sponsor them, and I'm taking them through the steps, and they're getting sober, and they're sponsoring other guys. And I am not making amends to my father. And I got to tell you, one of the things that I run into with the guys that I sponsor is a lot of them have issues. I had issues with God. God's not the problem. One of the things my sponsor pointed out to me is you'll see the word God over 100 times in the big book, but Bill also uses the words creative intelligence, universal mind, higher power. At one point in time on page 13, he refers to God as my newfound friend with a capital F. The title is not important. It's that we seek and find. And it was explained to me that if you ever got a religious or a spiritual practice, we don't have an argument with it. The book says, be quick to see where religious people are right. There are many great books and there's no issue. But if you've got a problem with God, why don't you use that as a word, as a placeholder for an experience you haven't had yet that you'll get through taking the steps? And I thought, I don't know. And my sponsor asked me, do you like music? I said, yeah, I like music. He goes, well, do you know anybody that doesn't like music? I said, no, I think pretty much everybody likes music. He asked me what type of music I like. I said, well, I like blues and rock. And he said, well, if you were talking to somebody and they like maybe country western music or classical music or punk rock or jazz or rap, would you tell them they have to listen to the music that you like to listen to? I said, no, obviously you like the music that you like. That's what you like. He said, well, that's exactly like the concept of God or a higher power in Alcoholics Anonymous. We're not telling you what it is. We're just suggesting that you get into rhythm and harmony with a tune that makes sense to you. You get to pick the tune and you can change your mind at any time. He said, do you ever sing in the shower? I'm like, well, it's kind of a personal question, but yeah, I do. I sing in the shower. He goes, well, do you always know the words to all the songs? No, because exactly, it doesn't matter. Just start singing. You'll get there. And that's been my experience. I sponsor quite a few guys. I get guys that are Protestant, guys that are Catholic, guys that have converted, switch back and forth. I've got some guys who are Jewish, Buddhist, Hindu, Muslim. I got one guy who's a Druid, like Stonehenge. I don't get it. I don't have to get it. A lot of guys that are, they find a God of their understanding on a surfboard out of the Pacific Ocean or walking through the woods, like Walt Whitman. One guy who's Jewish, he likes Buddhism. He calls himself a Buju. It's all good. We don't have a problem. We don't have a conflict. And so we're going through this process, and I'm sponsoring these guys, but I'm not making amends to my father. This goes on for a period of a few years. And I have regular contact with my sponsor. I'm having a conversation with him. I'm just telling him that I'm not going to be at my home group, the Hermosa Beach Men's Stag meets on Monday nights, because I got to fly up to Anchorage, Alaska. I got to do some depositions. I'll be gone for a few days, maybe the whole week. I'm not sure. And he lights up like a Christmas tree. He gets all excited. He goes, man, that is great. You'll make amends to your father. And I had forgotten that I had told my sponsor that my father at the time was living in Wasilla, Alaska, which is about 30 miles outside of Anchorage. So now my sponsor's connecting two clearly unrelated dots, and I'm trying to wave them off. I'm like, whoa, no, this is business. This has nothing to do with Alcoholics Anonymous. And he looks at me and he leans in. He goes, no, it has everything to do with Alcoholics Anonymous. He goes, you've been praying, right? Well, yeah. He goes, well, you've been praying. I've been praying. God's talking. Can't you hear him? I'm like, frankly, no, I am not getting the memo at all. He goes, look, you pray and meditate every morning, right? I said, yeah. He goes, okay, over the next week or two, I want you to get quiet, have a conversation with God, and ask God what you should do. All right, I follow directions. 3 or 4 days into it, what comes to me is I should do this. Now, it wasn't like I had a white light experience or anything. No bush lit on fire. I didn't hear, the heavens didn't open up and say, this is my son in whom I'm well pleased. I think really what happened was I started realizing I'm a hypocrite, and I'm telling all these guys to go out and make amends, and I'm not doing it. I'm feeling guilty. So I go to my sponsor. I go, all right, I'll do it. What do I do? Without skipping a beat, he goes, I don't know. I'm not going up there to talk to God. I'm like, man, you are killing me. I used to call this guy the cosmic cupcake, the mystic muffin. It didn't matter what the problem was. The solution in his mind was always pray and meditate, ask for guidance and direction. And by the way, understand, God is old and slow, doesn't wear a wristwatch, is not operating the same time schedule as we are. So it may take a while to get the answer, and you may not get the answer where you think you're going to get the answer. It could come from that old guy. You don't like the way he shares every time at the meeting, right? Pay attention. Maybe talk to him before or after the meeting. He might have the answer. Or you might get it in the grocery store, listening to, some lady talk to her kids. I don't know where you're going to get it. But if you wait, you'll get it. And he would tell me, he said, and in the meantime, stay on the firing line of life in Alcoholics Anonymous, keep working with newcomers and look for other people to work with. This will be the solution to all your problems. And I remember thinking, this is such a shallow, superficial, overly simplistic solution that has worked in every problem I've ever had if I just do it. So I'm not sure what I'll do, but I call my father. He says he'll see me. I fly up to Anchorage. I go through the terminal. I see my father. He's older than me. He's shorter than me, and he's hesitating. He's kind of shuffling towards me, but he's uncertain. I stride towards him with purpose because I had made a commitment in Alcoholics Anonymous. I got no idea what I'm going to do. But when I got up there without really thinking, I grabbed my father and I hugged him, and he buried his head in my shoulder and he cried. And I cried, and forgiveness occurred. And all I had to do was show up and get out of the way. We had we had discussions afterwards. I made a more formal amends. I asked if there was anything that I could do. I asked him if he needed to tell me anything, and it was good. A father was restored to a son, and a son to a father, and that's Alcoholics Anonymous. And he didn't make amends to me. He doesn't have to. It's my side of the street, not his side of the street. And, I'd been up there, and I know my stepmother, I know my half sister, and he's been down and seen my kids, and it was good. But he died this year. He died January 18th, and he had been sick for a while. He had congestive heart failure. He was in a hospital up in Anchorage, and no one could go see him. He didn't have COVID, but because of the COVID restrictions, you couldn't get in. But my father, he could talk on the phone. And he was 87, so he was kind of technologically challenged. But he had a cell phone, and so we would FaceTime. But I could never get him to understand that FaceTime means you hold it up to your face, Dad, so I can see your face, because he couldn't hear very well. So he would hold it up to his ear. So I'd have these lovely conversations for 2 or 3 hours with my father's ear, looking at his ear. And he made amends to me, which shocked me. Again, it's not required, but it was a beautiful thing. And now if I had sponsored him, it was a weak amends as far as AA goes. I'm just saying, but this was my father, and it was perfect, and before he died, he said he loved me, and I said I loved him, and I meant it. And that's because of Alcoholics Anonymous. A guy named Alexander Pope one time said that to err is human, we all do it. To forgive is divine. And what he's talking about there is that this forgiveness is critical. I mean, we talk a lot about acceptance, but acceptance only gets you about halfway there. I can still accept you, but not forgive you. I can still have that underlying resentment. Forgiveness is the only solution. And if it's a minor transgression, I got no problem. I can forgive you. But like something like my father, I need divine help. And what happens is I pray and meditate. I ask God for guidance and direction. And every single time he sends me to you and you to me. Apparently that's how he works. And it's always sufficient unto my needs. And I know that this thing works, and not just because I've read about it or you've talked about it, but you showed me and you walked me through it. And one of the reasons why I know it absolutely works is because about 5.5 years ago, I got shot. Now, I've been shot before when I was in the Army, but it was kind of a minor flesh wound. This time it was pretty significant. I was up in Badger, California, which is right next to Sequoia National Forest. It's a beautiful area, very rustic. It was a Saturday morning. We'd had breakfast. I was back in my cabin, minding my own business. I was sitting on my bed. I wasn't bothering anybody. And the gentleman upstairs from me decided it would be a really good time to clear his Glock 9mm weapon, which is ordinarily not a problem. But he missed a rather critical step. He forgot to remove the magazine. So when he pulled the slide back, he actually jacked around into the chamber. He pointed it at the floor that he was on, which was the ceiling above me. He pulled the trigger. That discharged around. It went through the ceiling above me. It entered my chest right above my heart, and it lodged in my sternum. Now, I'll tell you, this will get your attention. We talk a lot about serenity in Alcoholics Anonymous, but the first word out of my mouth was a kind of a shortened version. I yelped a shortened version of fire truck. And I grabbed a towel, I put it on my chest because I'm bleeding. Meantime, the guy from upstairs comes running downstairs. He comes running around the corner. He goes, "What happened?" I'm like, "What happened? You shot me. That's what happened." And he starts freaking out, which is understandable because he's accidentally discharged a firearm. He shot somebody. I'm bleeding from the chest. Who knows what's going to happen? I could die. The police could be involved. He is freaking out. And then a really peculiar, very odd thing happened. I started trying to calm him down, which is bizarre. This happened right before my 20th AA birthday. If this had happened 21 years earlier, I would have been 10 different shades of pissed off. I don't know what your idea of a justified resentment is, but getting shot, that ought to be really high on the list, right? But because of Alcoholics Anonymous and because of the steps and because of forgiveness and because of what you've shown me and demonstrated to me and through me, I didn't resent this guy. I went right to forgiveness. I was really concerned about his welfare, trying to calm him down. Now, having said that, I've been shot. I got to go to the hospital, right? So he takes me down to a little town called Visalia. We go to Kauai Medical Center. We go in there, and by the way, when you go in the emergency room, you've been shot, you get a lot of attention. You go right to the head of the list. They got a gurney out. They got 12, 13 people working on me. They wheel me in. They do an overhead X-ray, and they do an EKG. And there's a cardiothoracic surgeon that's attending. And after a while, about 15, maybe 20 minutes, he goes, God, this is bizarre. We're looking at this X-ray. This bullet is lodged in your sternum. It's still there, by the way. He goes, it's not moving. Your bleeding has stopped. You looks like you're going to stabilize. So we're probably going to let you go in about 2 or 3 days. But he said, when we did the EKG, we did notice you've got this thing called an atrial flutter, which is like atrial fibrillation. Your heart is spasming, which isn't very surprising because, bullet just went within a couple millimeters of it. And he said, when you get released, you're going to have to see a cardiologist because you're going to need treatment for that. So I get released. I go down to where I live in Redondo Beach. I go to Torrance Memorial Medical Center. I see Dr. Carlson, my cardiologist. He hooks me up to an EKG, and he confirms I've got an atrial flutter. He goes, yeah, you got an atrial flutter. He goes, look, there's a procedure that we have. It's called a cardioversion. And it works most of the time. He said, have you ever seen in the movies where they take the paddles and they paddle a guy? I'm like, yeah. He goes, well, we're not going to do that to you. That would be barbaric. What we're going to do is we're going to tape these pads to your chest. They'll be hooked to electrodes. What we're going to do is we're going to hit you with a jolt of electricity. That'll stop your heart. We will wait 5 to 7 seconds. Then we'll hit you with another jolt of electricity. That'll restart your heart, and hopefully it'll be in sync. And I'm like, Doc, I am not that quick on the uptake, but that sounds like you're going to kill me. He's like, oh, no. We don't like to look at it that way. It's a controlled procedure. I've done it hundreds of times. I'll be attending. You'll be in the hospital. And by the way, before the procedure occurs, there will be an anesthesiologist that will come in and give you something that will make you comfortable. So I'm an alcoholic. I go right from you're going to kill me to I'm going to get comfortable. And it's not that I haven't been comfortable in Alcoholics Anonymous, but I haven't been that kind of comfortable in 20 years. And this is a free pass. My sponsor will be cool with this. I'm like, Doc, sign me up. Let's do this thing. So I'm in the hospital. I got the gown on. I got the pads taped to my chest. I got an IV in my arm. Dr. Carlson's here. The anesthesiologist walks in. He's got a syringe of comfortable. I am watching him all the way across the room. He gets in front of me. He leans over. He starts talking to me. And the next thing I know, Dr. Carlson's leaning over me. He's like, how you doing? I'm like, I'm good, Doc. He goes, well, how do you feel? I feel fine. I'm ready. Let's do the procedure. He's like, oh, no. We did the procedure. The procedure's over. It looks like it went okay. We're done. And I'm like hell, where's the guy who's going to give me something to make me comfortable? This is bullshit. You told me I am arguing with my cardiologist about general anesthesia. And the newcomers, the young guys won't understand this, but the older people will understand that in the old days, when they would give you general anesthesia, they would tell you to count back from 100. And you would go 100, 99, 98. We love 99 and 98. The problem today is they have, they would call it good dope. We would call it bad dope. They have this stuff called propofol, which is what they gave Michael Jackson. They just gave me the correct dose. The problem with propofol is you're here and then you're here. There's no there. There's no 99. Very disappointing. But the other point about this story is, in addition to the forgiveness, is if you're new, hopefully you'll read the big book. You'll eventually get into the 12 and 12. And if you get into the 12 and 12, in the 10th chapter, there's a discussion about the various forms of inventory that we do. But there's also some commentary about how a lot of us, we like to take an annual or biannual retreat, and get away from the clamors of the world. Maybe have somebody that's in AA give us some guidance or direction regarding the steps or spirituality. Sometimes you go to a professional God person, but the point is it's a safe, serene, secure environment. I got shot on an AA retreat. But that's not the half of it. I was leading the retreat. I'd given a talk the night before on unity, which I thought was rather compelling, but apparently that guy was not paying attention. I got shot Saturday morning. That evening, I was scheduled to give a talk on acceptance and forgiveness. Yeah. But here's the best part. The guy that shot me, I sponsor him. I sponsored him then, and I sponsor him now. And that's only because of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, disclaimer, if you're new, I am not suggesting that you shoot your sponsor. You won't find that in the book. It's not only not required, it's absolutely not suggested, although you may think it's appropriate from time to time. We don't do that. This was an accident, okay? And one of the things that I've come to learn is, you know, Phil referred to Bill C. One of the things that Bill C likes to say is that we come into Alcoholics Anonymous and we take off the clown suit. We do. We absolutely do. But we do not throw it away. No, 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 no. We hang it up. We press it. We keep it ready because we have to take it out from time to time to just act like an idiot. I've done it many times. I've made a lot of mistakes before I got to AA. I've made a lot of mistakes since I've been to AA, but because of the steps, because of God of my understanding, because of forgiveness, and because of this fellowship, we can work through all this stuff. You know, one of the guys that I loved, a guy named Sandy Beach, used to tell me, he said, Lamb, you're in the movie of your life. You can't get out of the movie. And you know, you read pages 60 through 63, you think you're the director. You're not the director. Hell, you're not even the main actor. A lot of times you're like a two-bit stagehand. Sometimes you're not even in the production. You're just in the audience, but you're in the movie of your life. You can't get out of the movie of your life. Now you have choices to make. You can look at it as Friday the 13th. It can be a horror movie. That's going to be really grim. It's going to be real tough. Or you can look at it as a comedy. You know, you can make sure you don't drift into morbid reflection, like we're cautioned not to do. And if you do that, we're pretty entertaining. I mean, if you're new, it's not funny when you get here. I mean, when I was new, it was bleak, it was ugly. After a while, it's rather entertaining. We are weird. We're really weird. And the stuff that we think of as normal is just absolutely bizarre. Absolutely bizarre. I mean, it's incomprehensible, really, that we're sober. And sometimes we lose sight of the fact that if we got what we deserve, probably wouldn't be here. You know, we probably wouldn't be here. I know that I have from time to time complained to my sponsor about various things, and he has told me repeatedly. I remember the first time he told me this. He said, "You know, there's good news and bad news." Like, okay, what's the bad news? Because the bad news is it never ends. It never ends. Like, oh God, what's the good news, Michael? I said, well, the good news is the same as the bad news. It never ends. So there's always something to do, and there's always somebody to do it with. And if you're new and you don't have a sponsor, I hope you find that person soon, because you'll probably be helping that person more than you could imagine. When I was assigned Michael as a sponsor, for a long time, I thought that, you know, Jim, my grand sponsor, was trying to help me. I've been around a while. I realized that's not what was going on. What happened was Jim saw me. He saw how messed up I was. I found out later that Michael was having some difficulty. He was having trouble at work with his relationship with his wife. He had sponsees that weren't participating, and he was struggling. So Jim saw me, saw how messed up I was, took me out, delivered me to Michael and said, here, play with this. This will keep you entertained for a while. Because that's what sponsees are. We're a divine distraction. We help us get each other out of self and into God. You know, AA is we're like the island of misfit toys. Everybody's got damage. Everybody's broken. We're all being repaired, and none of us are working on ourselves. This is not a self-help program. We're working on each other. And it's through that we get well, or at least passively better as far as most of society views us. So thanks for having me here. I love you. Have a great night.